is Wendy Kate Moyle, your relationship specialist. And today's episode is we're going to be talking about sex and all things intimacy. So let's get on with the show. So I'm going to introduce you to Kate Moyle, who is an accredited psychosexual and relationship specialist and co-founding partner and in-house expert at Pillow App for Couples. I'd like to say that I met Kate while we were both on a training course several years ago, and then we bumped into each other again. So it's lovely to meet up again and reconnect, Kate, because you are much more into the sexual side and the issues that crop up for people, whereas I work more on the communication and so on. I never really trained in that, specifically on the sexual side. So it's lovely to have that connection. I wonder, would you like to introduce yourself, Kate, and tell us more about you?
Yeah, of course. It does seem like a long time ago we did that course, actually, doesn't it? It probably is a long time ago, about 8 years ago, I think. Yeah, so I'm a psychosexual and relationship therapist, but most of my work focuses on the sexual difficulties and problems that couples are experiencing, and very much angled towards, I suppose, the kind of sexuality, intimacy, sexual relationship side of things. Obviously, relationships, communication, disputes, things like that obviously come into it. And that's why I then also trained as a relationship therapist, because for me as a psychosexual therapist, so much of both overlap and they're so related. And alongside that, we launched Pillow App, which is an intimacy tool for couples, so an intimacy app for couples, where they are listening to follow-along audio-guided intimacy episodes with everything from 5 minutes of eye contact to sensual massage to playing with the senses to different types of kissing. And that was because we wanted to create something for couples that they could do at home and really enjoy together, and would encourage them to feel closer.
And I've listened to some of your episodes and they really are lovely. And I think it's so nice that there is that there, because I think we've got so much more into technology these days that people are more related to that. They can relate more readily to something that they can connect with in that way.
Yeah, and I think, so much of it was so many people don't have the time to sit down and read a whole book on how to change their relationship, or that people, time is such a valuable asset to people nowadays that lots of people, not everyone of course, want something that they can do kind of then and there, and they want something more immediate that can help. And we wanted to present that in a sensitive form that also helped couples in the moment to do something different, but also to feel like they could connect with each other. And the irony being that technology is often the reason they're struggling to connect when they're in person.
Absolutely. I have that. I think one of the basic things that causes couples issues, in my experience, is that not being able to communicate at a deeper level, not being really able to talk to each other or knowing how to say things, because it seems to touch that vulnerability of ourselves so readily. And also I think it's some people just don't know how to talk to each other apart from on that very superficial level, and because they've never been taught how to do it.
Yeah, and we're quite scared of our vulnerability a lot of the time, and we're told that we should be strong and that it's weak to show your emotions. It's very British of us. But it's obviously that kind of means that we're defending ourselves, not just against ourselves, but often against our partners, and kind of being authentic and genuine in how we're communicating with them as well, which I know is so much of the work you do with couples, is breaking that down.
I'd just like to ask you, what do you think the problems and worries about sex and intimacy are, the most common ones? And is there anything that makes them worse?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing a kind of completely wide range of things at the moment, and it's often, when it comes to couples, it's that there is a difference in how often, for example, they might be liking to have sex. So one partner would like sex a lot more than the other, or a lot less than the other. And often how that is communicated tends to become more of the problem than the problem itself. But also, I work with a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, and there's a lot around kind of sexual insecurity or sexual anxiety, not feeling confident, and this idea that it looks like everybody else is having fantastic sex lives and fantastic relationships. You know, it's on social media, it's presented, it's, I heard someone talking about Instagram this morning on a podcast as a curated reality. And this idea that then often means that we feel that we're lacking in some way because we're just seeing the good parts of everybody else's lives, and when we're struggling with ours, that can make us feel worse. But when it comes to sex as well, I think that lots of people are struggling with sexual dysfunctions that they feel like they don't understand, that they're having difficulties, and that a huge part of it is they don't feel like they can talk about it. They feel like sex is a taboo subject, even with the person that they're having sex with. And that's a huge cultural, social problem that we see.
Yes, I would agree. I think I bring it into the open straight away so that people know that they can discuss issues around sex, although say I'm not a real expert on it, but I like that I could signpost people. But being able to say that whether their sex life is good or not, and feeling able to talk more openly, because as you say, we're so British, and we dodge around all sorts of issues, don't we? Can't talk about it. We even can't even name our genitals. But they're given nicknames because it's too embarrassing to talk about it. Even when you go to the GP will talk about your private parts or something. We just are so British.
And it's a very avoided subject, and it's kind of very deeply ingrained. I mean, we are changing slightly now, but even, you look at things like the sex education model doesn't include talking about pleasure, that it's all biology and reproduction, and this is what you do to get pregnant and what you don't do to not get pregnant or get a sexually transmitted infection. And it's very functional, but a huge amount of the time people are having sex for non-functional reasons. The reason they're having sex is to feel closer to their partner, to experience intimacy, for fun, for pleasure, because it feels good. There was a study done recently, I can't remember who it's by, that said that they found 276 reasons that people had sex. And, lots of people aren't having sex because they're trying to have children. They're doing it for, what sounds like 275 other reasons.
Yes, we just talked, as you say, about the functionality and not about the emotional side of it or what it brings up, and that connectedness, whichever it is, and missing out on that real connection. And intimacy is much more, I think, about the sexual act. It's far deeper than that. And I think some couples just don't get it. They don't make that connection at all, really, do they? And I would certainly not taught it at school.
Yeah. And of course, you can have sex without intimacy and intimacy without sex. There are lots of couples that aren't sexual but are very intimate, and vice versa. But quite often we feel that, and people feel that sex is a measure of the healthiness of a relationship, or that the relationship is going well or not well. They use it as a measure, and again, that isn't always the case. There are lots of people that are very happy not to have sex, and as long as both partners feel okay with that, then that shouldn't be a problem for them.
It's when there are problems and that's causing the problem, or people don't understand. I think that's much more the case. And I just wonder, do you think there's more about concerns about our sexuality, our gender issues than there used to be? I mean, it's more open now, but do you think that's caused more concerns for maybe people?
I think that the problems of people, those concerns, those worries have always been there. The difference is it is people are more able to access help, they're more able to talk. There are people, standing up and addressing these issues in a public forum, in a public space nowadays. But we know that people have been struggling with gender identity and, sexual identity and questioning their sexuality for years, hundreds of years, and that in itself isn't a new problem, but it's just that, homosexuality was illegal, 50 years ago. So we see kind of how far the world's come in a short space of time.
Is there anything that you think that makes it worse? Those problems about sex and intimacy?
I think I would think this, because this is why we made Pillow App, but that technology can be a huge hindrance for couples when they're face to face. That, for example, one of the things I always notice is couples in restaurants where there's two of them at a table, but there's actually four of them at the table because there's two of them with two phones, and they're actually both kind of looking into their phones instead of looking at each other, or not really noticing actually the food that's in front of them, or enjoying they're missing the moment. And that technology is wonderful for so many reasons. You could talk to your partner in Australia face to face. You can connect with loved ones all around the world, or when people are away at work, or for an extended period of time. But when we're together, it can detract from the experience of actually being with someone. It's kind of a constant third person that's there with us.
Yeah, or even fourth.
Fourth, or however many phones people tend to have.
Yeah. And what do you feel about the reality programs, so like Love Island and programs like that? What are your views on that? I'm interested because I've got thoughts about it, but I'm just curious what your thoughts might be.
Yeah, I suppose I'm kind of have mixed opinions on it. It's, one thing, you look at Love Island, it was the most watched TV program of the year, I think, of the last couple of years. Millions of people kind of tuning in to watch it. But I think there's something hopeful about that, in the way that people want love to happen. They want to kind of watch it. They want to kind of see people falling in love and the relationships working, that we're all quite romantic in that sense. There is that hope that things will work out and we'll ride off into the sunset together on a white horse. But also that there's something kind of, again, very public about it, which makes it feel, perhaps to people that struggle to get into relationships, that it's very easy to fall into them, or it doesn't translate to real life, I suppose, necessarily, because those environments are very intensive, but equally that it can kind of fast forward relationships being in that kind of environment. And I suppose it's about people's expectations. What do they hope from being in a relationship? Do they think it will be the same as that, and then they meet someone kind of in real life or in a real life setting, and it doesn't feel as exciting as it appeared on TV? It doesn't feel as intense. They don't fall in love so quickly, and do they then feel disappointed because that was their expectation?
Yeah, and I suppose my concerns are that, as you said, it's false because it's not real life. But I also feel that a lot of these situations are maybe based just on the pheromones coming into play, because we know that they work, and then there's that almost an animal attraction, which doesn't last forever. But also the fact that it seems rather shallow, that maybe that relationship is just based on sex alone. And I don't believe that is always helpful, because you can't base a relationship just on sex.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. And I just worry that more young people just have that view that, well, you meet someone, you go to bed with them, and that's all there is to it, and you're going to live happily ever after.
Or that relationships might appear to be more disposable, for example.
Exactly.
But I suppose the interesting kind of flip side to that point is that actually recent surveys have shown that Generation Z, I suppose as they're called, are having much less sex than generations before them, and younger people are having less sex than generations kind of 30 years before. And so although there's this idea that we're in a hookup culture where people meet on apps and they get together, and that it is more based on sex rather than a different way of meeting, kind of face to face, or starting a conversation first, or that the conversation happens online rather than face to face, that actually kind of research which is beginning to now come through is showing that there is a lot less sex happening than perhaps there used to be.
Really?
Which I think is really interesting. Mm.
Is that in initial relationships or generally on the journey of a relationship, if you like?
Both, by the sounds of things. So that actually people are having less kind of sexual partners, but also less sex. But that the idea, I suppose, is that lots of people, for example, don't have to go out in order to feel like they're socializing and meeting people and connecting with people, because they can do it through technology from their homes. So they are able to feel connected without needing perhaps the forms of connection that previous generations weren't able to do through technology.
And do you think those connections are as strong or as real as that face-to-face connection? What do you think?
I don't think that face-to-face connection will ever be beaten. I think it's so innate, and we know, eye contact between mother and baby is an important part of bonding, that skin-on-skin contact releases oxytocin, and that all of these things are kind of essential to human survival. I don't think they can ever really be replicated in the same way. And that, again, I suppose the other side is that we see online relationships that people can, for example, disappear. So we call it ghosting, where they just suddenly disappear and stop contacting that person. The rejection that people often give to others isn't necessarily kind of considered as strong or considered as damaging or considered as such a big deal than it would be face-to-face, but actually it can still cause all of that emotional upset and that emotional hurt, but it feels minimized because it isn't that face-to-face interaction. You're not necessarily having to experience someone's disappointment or someone's emotional reaction to that face-to-face. And the sad thing about that is technology offers people the chance to do that, just to change their mind and to not have to take as much responsibility for it.
Or take a risk. Because then they're not risking that
potential
closeness. Yeah, potential intimacy, that potential closeness, and as you say, possibly that potential rejection. So they're not putting themselves out there so much, are they?
Yeah, or it's putting themselves out there in a very different way. I can't remember who it was. Someone said it's like a rejection is in person is 10 times what it might be, for example, online.
Right. Yes, it's and I know there's and I can't remember the name of it, but there are studies several years ago of Japanese boys who were just locking themselves in the room and playing on games and not connecting at all with the outside world. And I suppose one of my concerns is that because of technology, there is a danger that younger people will stop connecting with it. Some, not all, but I think some younger people may stop connecting with each other and just connecting with technology.
And it's not even just younger people anymore, but we, using Japan as an example, we know that at the moment the birth rate in Japan is actually falling because people are having more virtual relationships actually or connecting with a kind of virtual model of a girlfriend instead of, so with a preference to having a in real life relationship, and that those are satisfactory for lots of people. They don't feel the need to then have relationships with others because they get all their emotional needs met through this form of relationship.
I find it rather distressing because I just feel that people are losing that ability to communicate with another human being, to bond with another human being, and we're not having that ability to be able to feel that sense of intimacy or connection with another human, which I think, because we're social beings, is quite vital for us. And as you say, it can affect the birth rate.
Well, also it means that when we are with people in real life, if what we've got used to is a more of a kind of one-sided relationship, that actually, you know, in real life, face-to-face relationships can feel more intense. They can tap into our emotions in a different way. They can make us feel more vulnerable, more exposed. And that might then feel uncomfortable in comparison to what we've got very comfortable with. In the way that lots of people find it very difficult to understand how technology can replace or is replacing in such a kind of quick-moving, fast-paced way our natural style of communicating.
And I think that's it. I often see that with couples, that their lives are so full, they're so filled up, they don't have time for each other, and they just don't connect with each other. They just neglect the relationship because everything else has to be fitted in: the children, the job, the activities, the hobbies, whatever else. And I feel that's really sad, because they complain that they want to have that closeness, but they can't find the time or make that effort to connect with each other and be with each other, which is what they were doing in the first place.
And I think that's exacerbated by the fact that our 9-to-5 jobs now don't necessarily fit that model anymore. So we, wake up with our phones as our alarm clocks. We see that we've got 20 unread emails that have come in overnight. So the first thing we roll over and check is our phone rather than our partner. That we are, constantly getting notifications, which are by default telling us that there is something that we need to check to do, and that we're not really escaping everything that we need to do in the way that perhaps we might have previously done, because our phones are constantly reminding us that we need to do more. We can't forget about this email needs answering. And so that model of home life and work life kind of taking separate spaces doesn't necessarily exist in the same way.
No. And I guess one of the biggest things I hear is that couples will sit on the sofa, maybe they're watching TV, but they'll each be on their own mobile or their laptop or something, and they're sitting at each end of the sofa, not talking to each other at all. And that feels so sad. And by the time they want to go to bed, they're not connecting with each other, because maybe one of them is watching a movie and the other one is still working. They've taken their laptop to bed, or they're watching a film because there's a TV in the room. And there's no personal connection there.
And the irony is, if you're also kind of both on phones or sending emails and things, is you're connecting with everybody that's outside the room, and there's one person in the room, and that's the one person you're not connecting with. And I suppose there is, a huge amount of irony in that, because the person with the relationship that you could be nurturing, the important one, is right in front of you, but you're missing it. And actually the really sad thing is, when we don't nurture those relationships, we then see them break down, because it's human nature to want to feel special and to want to feel loved and desired and, connected to another person. Obviously in early life we see that with children and parents, but in later life, in adult relationships, in intimate relationships. And that when those relationships aren't nurtured, they do get impacted by that. They do struggle because both people aren't getting their needs met.
Yeah. So do you find that couples are reticent to talk about sexual issues with you?
I think that most couples kind of come to psychosexual therapy with the kind of clues in the name. So it's okay to talk about sex here. That doesn't mean there's any less anxiety about it. That there is a huge amount of concern about what the right thing is to say or how to say it, or that it feels embarrassing a lot of the time. It feels taboo. It's something that hasn't been spoken about. But ultimately, that psychosexual therapy is the best place to try and talk about it, or one of the best places to try and talk about it, because there's almost a signpost, I suppose, into the conversation just by the definition of the therapy space.
So how do you make your couples feel at ease, or individuals?
I think it's also about, I think it's about modelling being able to talk about sex comfortably. I think being a psychosexual therapist, you talk about sex every day, so it's very much kind of in your vocabulary, and feeling relaxed around the subject, and also being able to show people that they don't have to feel that tension around the subject. Obviously that's not an immediate change, it's not kind of a magic wand, but in exploring that, and even just the kind of huge kind of sigh out of, okay, yeah, I'm kind of getting this off my chest. I think that can be very helpful for people just as a first step, because we know when we keep things to ourselves, we are very self-critical, we internalize, we tend to think that we must be the problem. And actually, when you unpack it a bit, you can understand things a bit better or from a different perspective, and that can take some of the pressure off ourselves.
Yeah, because I even feel that when people come to me and say they have an issue with their relationship, they feel so shamed and so embarrassed. Just the fact that they feel that they should be able to sort it out for themselves. That critical parent, that critical person within us who says, I should be able to do this. I shouldn't need to have somebody else to help me sort this out. And I think that's sad, because if you're prepared to try and resolve something, at least you're taking that step forward to say, it's just not quite right, and I want to make it right. Whereas so many couples or people just feel that, well, they're missing a trick, really, aren't they? Because they're just going to end up being really miserable and disconnected with each other.
And also the couples that are, going to see you are both saying, okay, this is something we want to address for our relationship, something we want to do for each other, and they're putting their relationship at the top of the priority list. It's going to therapy of any kind is a big statement to say, okay, I want to change this for me or for us or for my family or for whoever's involved. And that first inquiry, that first phone call or email, first session is a huge step in itself. I never kind of underestimate how difficult for people that is to send that initial inquiry saying, I think I need some help with this.
Yeah.
And relationships take a huge amount of work, but we don't like to admit it, and we're never told that. We're not educated on vulnerability and emotions and intimacy and relationships, and two independent adults coming together to be dependent on each other but still try and keep their independence, and how that can be challenging, and that it's hugely important that people know that relationships do take a huge amount of work, and that they won't always be easy. It isn't the Disney movie model, sadly, but we take the good with the bad.
Yeah, and I think because when we first meet someone, it's also easy. It just becomes natural. It's effortless, and I think that first romantic stage appears to be so effortless that if we're not careful, we can be lulled into that sense of feeling that, well, that's how it's always going to be because we agree on everything. But people don't recognize necessarily that that is just a stage of the relationship, and the fact that we put all our aspirations and dreams and beliefs onto that other person. And when we come out of that bubble and hit the real reality of the relationship, that's when the real relationship works. That's when it really, at the start of a real relationship. So and I think that the pheromones then start, that's at the stage when the pheromones aren't so active. And So it becomes almost, well, what am I doing here? If I made a mistake, and it can happen so easily. That's my experience anyway.
Yeah, you know, we have to manage life alongside our relationships, which, again, the relationships are kind of top of the priority list at the start. We want to spend all our time with someone, kind of put all our resources into being with them, give them all our time, our sexual energy, our energy. We feel like we're on a high when we're with them, and you know, at some point that has to give way to something more sustainable, which is also the security, the stability, routine, you know, work, earning money, paying a mortgage, looking after children. And at some point we have to address the balance of those two things, the novelty, the excitement, the unknown, and the reality of fitting it all in and alongside life. But I think we should celebrate couples that also go to couples therapy, or, you know, want to change their relationships or try something like Pillow App, because in every other part of our lives, if something isn't working, you know, like a body part, we go and get it checked. We check the health of it. We check we're okay, or we see a physio, or we see a doctor, or, you know, and our mental health, and to some degree our relationship and intimate relationships, and that part of health, which is a huge part, we feel more ashamed about saying, oh, I don't think it's working quite right, or there's this bit that I want to improve, or this bit doesn't seem to be working. And again, it kind of falls under that mental health banner, I suppose, of being more invisible, or we feel that we should always present as okay. Yeah.
And I think maybe this, from my own experience, because, I've had relationships that have broken down, their sense of shame. There's a shame that it didn't work, or I've got it wrong, I'm a failure. And I think for me, there was a huge amount of that. I can't admit to somebody that I got it wrong, or I'm not making it work, or there's something about me that isn't okay.
And so often it's about couple fit on so many levels, and every relationship with everyone can't always work. And, you know, we don't become best friends with everybody that we meet. We don't get on with all of our colleagues. We, you know, lots of relationships don't work. We just don't place the same kind of strength on them, I suppose. But also, when we try a relationship with someone, a couple relationship, an intimate relationship, a sexual relationship, that we are giving a bit of ourselves to that, and so it feels so much more personal if it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think for me, especially when in my first marriage, that it was more about knowing how to communicate with each other, or different ways of communicating. And then when we weren't connecting and things weren't going right, we just didn't know how to fix it ourselves, and we didn't know where to go. We didn't know who could help us. And I think it was just a case of, well, that's it. That's the end. And I just feel so passionately that if I'd had those tools, if I had the information, if I had the help, that perhaps that relationship could have survived, because it was just that we just didn't know how to do it. And that's really sad. So I suppose that's one of my reasons I've got such a passion about it, because, we just didn't know. There was a lot that we didn't know about. And I'd like that for other people. If they can learn to reconnect and fix their problems and sort them out and manage their relationship in a better way, then that's awesome, because it's not just the couple that disconnect, it's the children who are affected, and further generations and extended families. It can cause so many different problems. And if you fell in love with that person in the first place and you could make it work for several years, what is it that stopped you from keeping that connection going? And often it is just neglecting it. And, well, we're married now, or we're together now, so we don't have to bother. We can put that on the back burner. And I've had other, couples coming to me who said, well, I needed to focus on the career, the business, and pick the relationship up afterwards. Well, if you neglect it, that relationship is going to be there then.
and not making the assumption that that person, that relationship will always be there just because they are. I think, you know, it's quite often we get used to someone just being there, but we choose to be in our relationships every day. You know, we choose to be with that person, we choose to stay, we choose to continue or to not continue, and remembering that can be quite important. But I suppose also hearing you talk about it, you know, your personal journey has led you to now doing this, which is a huge part of it, because you're able to actually empathize with how people feel and how people understand and the reality of that. I suppose you're giving people the opportunity you didn't have.
Yeah, and I guess I can relate, you know, to it because I have experienced it. So I'm not identifying exactly with couples, but I can identify with a lot of it and say, yeah, that was my experience and I've been through it, and if only. So yeah, hopefully it gives them a better belief that I really get it.
Yeah,
to some degree.
Yeah.
And I guess with you talking earlier about this, about technology and the big part it plays. So I really want to know a little bit more. I know we touched on it earlier about this, the Pillow app. You know, how do people use it? What is your hope for this app? And so on. Tell me more about it.
Yeah. So, well, we are hoping you're going to be writing an episode for us in the not so distant future.
Yes,
so we'll be looking out for Wendy's episode. So it was basically an idea from our founder, a wonderful guy called Darren Smith, who used to work in gaming, and he was creating kind of children's games, and he just said, God, I just don't understand why we have so much playfulness as children and we don't have playfulness as adults. I just don't understand why we suddenly stop being playful, why it's something that's reserved for children and not for grown-ups. And was thinking about the kind of intimacy, relationship space, and Pillow was born out of that, I suppose, and us meeting, and we were talking about intimacy and how, you know, were the problems affecting couples today, was it sex? And actually we were thinking, well, maybe it's not. Maybe actually intimacy is the problem, and what we're seeing is the problem is with sex. What we're hearing is the reports that people are having less sex or less satisfying sex, but how are people getting to that point? And actually that a huge part of what's going on is the connection side of things. And we wanted to create something using technology because we wanted to be accessible to everybody, but also that where the focus wasn't on the technology. So we weren't creating a game for couples to play. We weren't creating something where they scored points, or the point of doing an intimacy task was not about the intimacy. We wanted the focus to be on the intimacy and to be on the couples and not on, for example, the technology, which is why the app is in the format it's in. And they are a combination of intimacy episodes with mindfulness techniques to help couples stay in the moment. So couples pick an episode, whether it's 15 different types of kiss, or it's a guided massage, or it's a communications exercise, or it's, so for example, one of our talking episodes is something called Memory Moments, where the couple go through talking about things like their first kiss, when they first met, what the feelings were when they first met, and things like that. And so kind of going back to happy memories as well. Some are more physical episodes, so for example, touch-based, whether it's a hand massage or it's kind of asking and giving touch. Some are about eye contact, some are as simple as a hug. And couples pick an episode, press play with a female or a male voice, and they focus on each other for that period of time, whether it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes. And it allows them the space to just be completely focused on each other, to give each other their full attention and to connect and feel close to one another.
I think that's lovely because, as you say, it's just that spending that time, and it's instant, which is what so many people want. They want that instant kind of response. I think before we started this talking, we were talking about the fact that people don't want to pick up a book. They haven't got the time to read it. And so, or they don't want to. And so to be able to just click on an app and just, you've got 5 minutes or 20 minutes just to have that, yes, that connection is just so lovely.
And we know so many couples, exactly what you were saying earlier, are really busy and really struggle to find time for intimacy, which is why we made the model where some episodes are 5 minutes, because however busy, every couple can find 5 minutes in their week. But it's, you know, some people do love to read books still. It's just that lots of people feel that time is their most precious commodity. And, you know, the world we live in is very fast paced, and we felt like we needed to kind of go with that. Well, as we were talking about podcasts as well, you know, that people can listen on the go and listen when they're commuting or when they're traveling, and that it's the beauty of gaining information in a way that is useful and practical. Whereas if you're saying to someone, okay, well, you need to set aside 2 hours to do this intimacy exercise, that they might never do it because they feel like just the time limit is too much of a challenge to even get started. And we want to break down those barriers, because it really is easy for people to feel closer and connected. It doesn't take a huge amount. And just the value of feeling like you have your partner's full undivided attention is a huge part of it.
And there's nothing more precious, is there, than having that total connection with another human being. And if it's that special person in your life, that makes such a difference, I think.
Yeah, just knowing, time together. Yeah.
And knowing that you're really connected and that they really care about you in that moment and you care about them. And just feeling that real connection is such a lovely thing.
Well, one of our first, one of the introductory episodes, it's called Appreciation. And it's 5 minutes of just offering each other, appreciation for something that you've done, whether it's something big or small. And, the feedback we get is, we haven't done anything like that for such a long time, or we used to do a lot of that. We used to do it automatically. That it can also just be a simple reminder of the things that we used to do and have fallen out of the habit of doing, or we used to think about more, or we used to pay more attention to. And again, as we spend more time with people, we kind of forget to say please or thank you. We forget to say, that was really kind of you, or that's so sweet, or thank you for the small things, that cup of tea, that picking up the dry cleaning, or, dropping off the kids when it was my turn, or, whatever it is, we forget to appreciate those things.
Yes, that's a huge one, isn't it? And I know you talked earlier saying that relationships need working at, but I think I also would encourage people to have fun together, because like you're talking about, is only children play, but I think it's lovely to let our inner child out and just have that fun. And I think when you talked about working at a relationship, just noticing that actually it's fun. It's fun to reconnect. It's fun to do those things that, I don't know, maybe you did 10 years ago and feel that you're too old to do now. Or why? There's no reason. And just enjoying that fun. I think children can help you do that, because you can relive it all again, your childhood. But I think sometimes adults forget that you can have fun together, and don't lose that. Don't lose that magic of having a good belly laugh together, or just being silly, or playing, I don't know, just playing Snap or a card game or anything, or just enjoying each other's company and doing those things that I really love my inner child to go out to play. I think we can get too serious in life sometimes and lose that connection.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that so much of that is also what helps our sex lives. Because everything gets so serious, and then we kind of get lost in getting out of all of that seriousness and letting go of things and just being fun, enjoying pleasure and being kind of, away from everything else that we're so focused on, even if it is just 10 minutes of our evenings. It's so important.
Yeah. As you say, it doesn't have to be sex per se, but just that connection together, just that hugging and kissing, or just feeling close to each other. And it doesn't have to be penetrative sex. It can be just that enjoyment or connection or fondling or massage or anything can feel just as pleasurable. I think people just lose that. They forget it, and it can be just almost routine, and they lose that. I think I heard this lovely expression, and I really repeat it quite often to clients. When do you start foreplay? And the answer was after the last orgasm. And if you can't remember when that was, then you better get on the case right this minute.
Yeah, or, and it's a huge part of it, isn't it? Why, as we said, people don't have to have a sexual relationship to have a playful and fun one. It could just be, sensuality is a huge part of sexuality. And I work with couples that, for example, can't have intercourse. They're not able to have sex for a variety of reasons, whether that's no injury or ill health or dysfunction. But there is no reason that those people should miss out on all of the great stuff that goes with an intimate sensual relationship, and they don't. No. And they don't have to. But when we think about sex as just intercourse, we're limiting ourselves to a very, small model of what we can do. Yeah.
And I think really the whole message when I was talking doesn't have to be about the orgasm, but it just is about the foreplay, that connection with each other. And yes, it doesn't have, as I say, it doesn't have to be full-blown sex, but just that connection. And that, I think that's the real message, isn't it? That just having that connection with each other in whichever way, and experiencing that sensuality, that intimacy, that really lovely connection that you possibly don't have with another human being to that degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's been really lovely talking today. And thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me on my podcast. And Kate, I will put all your information on my show notes. But if you'd like to let people know how they can get in touch with you, then let us know now. They can, if they hear it now, then that's fine. And I promise I'll put it in the show notes as well. So please go ahead and tell people how we can connect.
Absolutely. So I am at www.katemoyle.co.uk, and Pillow is www.pillow.io, and we're also on Twitter and Instagram at TryPillow, and I'm at Kate Moyle Psych on Twitter. But would love to hear with anyone. Love people to check out the app and see what they think.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's been just a delight talking to you again. It's been too long, and really enjoyed it. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
I really hope you found the discussion I had with Kate today interesting and informative. Do leave a review and let me know your thoughts on it. And if you found that interesting, why not subscribe? Because there's lots of interesting episodes coming up. Bye for now.